This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
Crossroads of Twilight, Chapter 9, Traps.
This chapter is a fucking trap, I'm telling you. We're going to go in and we're never coming back out again.
Our symbol is a falcon in a box, which is how I feel, like a bird in a box, trying to flap its way out and being denied the sweet release of lift.
But in a lot of ways, it references back when Faile got trapped in Teleron Riyadh and Perrin had to do his search and rescue her. And I think in a lot of ways, that's one of the reasons why this storyline can be so frustrating to read, because you're like, dude, we did this. He looked for her. He rescued her. This is a repeat just in real life of what that Teleron Riyadh storyline was like again.
Oh my God, you're right. It totally is. It's almost like the dream was foreshadowing what was going to happen in their whole relationship, right? Because that's the encounter where he's like, actually, I'm madly in love with you, despite being super antagonistic to you on all the pages preceding this exact moment.
That's when he calls her my falcon instead of Zyrene or whatever her actual name is.
Yeah, so it's like somehow he set this trajectory where he's going to just have to keep seeking after her. And we do not appreciate that, Perrin. Why?
It reminds me of a couple that always has to fight, to keep the relationship spicy. He's always got to be tracking her down just to keep the relationship. Like that's how what they built their relationship on. So she still has to run away and force him to find her, or
it's
else
like
they
playing
don't know
hard
how to
to
interact.
get, but
right.
You need a third party to bring unconsensual kidnapping into it rather than just playing hard to get. You are literally against your own will, difficult to acquire.
Well, thank goodness in Randland there's plenty of people willing to kidnap helpless young women, not kill them right away, and wait for them to be captured by keeping them in a dungeon. That happens so often. It's always amazing to me that, so many of the side characters get killed, but the main characters, they just get captured and stored in the White Cloaks camp, in the Shaido camp, in a dungeon, in a collar. I'm sure fill in the blank. I'm sure there's plenty more you can think of.
Yeah.
Hell, even Mellar doesn't kill them right away. He's like, wait, I'm going to cut out your babies. Hold on a minute.
And then I'm going to heal you, and then I'm going to sexually assault you.
Right. Yeah.
It's very nobody can just be killed. That's such a book one move for low-level characters.
Well, if one thing I'll say the show did right, killing Dana was pretty shocking and pretty cool.
I like the stakes being that high that early.
Yeah.
It feels like the soft, weird, fantasy bodice ripper vibes of the 80s that were showing through in the early books has been thoroughly expunged by the time we get to the show. It's no, it is the 2020s and millennials are in charge of this.
True.
And she complained again that the other wise ones are timid. Faile finished in her best meek voice, shifting the tall basket she held balanced on one shoulder, shifting from foot to foot in the muddy snow. The basket was not heavy, though filled with dirty laundry, and the wool of her white robe was thick and warm, with 2 underrobes beneath, but her soft leather boots, themselves bleached white, gave little protection from the cold slush. I was told to report what the wise one Savannah said exactly, she added quickly. Somarin was one of the other wise ones, and her mouth had turned down at the word timid. So, dropping into Faile's situation just mid-sentence.
Right. Just this is what she's been up to. Last time we saw her, she was being kidnapped. Now she's being the Sky Shine. We hear. And I think the next maybe couple, 2-3 pages are almost a description of how the Guy Shine in the Shaido camp are being treated. And who they are, and, what makes you Savannah's Guy Shine versus a different Guy Shine if you're wearing the gold belt. But yeah, just sort of a very broad introduction to Faile and the Guy Shine in the Shaido camp.
Because the last time that we saw Faile, she was being inducted into being a servant of Savannah, but that was on the march.
Oh, okay.
This is us visiting her now that they've settled into Malden.
Okay. I forgot about that scene.
Yeah, the last time we saw her, she was being told, this is your life now. And now we're dropping into montaging it. This has been her life for the past 22 days. And this is basically a work camp. What gets described here is like a plantation for labor exploitation. Like, all the prisoners are kept in the middle and treated like animals. And there's as many prisoners as there are guards. Huge amount of the Shaido population is being spent on managing the prisoners. It's a work camp. Mm-hmm. It's really messed up. And there's then this lovely description that just tells us how cool the Aiel and the Shaido and all of this is. No one called them that, servants. In Aiel eyes, being a servant was demeaning, but that was what they were, the Wetlanders at least. Just unpaid and with fewer rights and less freedom than any servant Faile had ever heard tell of. Like, they have all been enslaved and put in a work camp. This is like some peak of slavery southern plantation stuff, except that they only moved in 2 weeks ago with like 140,000 people.
And the Shaido are really starting to create trouble because there is no work for them to do. They are bored because before you can even pick up a cup, there's 3 guys shine waiting to do it.
This is the beginning of order breaking down. We see it being much more broken down after, I think, another 2 or 3 weeks of being here. Because at this point, they've only been settled for like 4 days in this spot, I think. And so this is just the very first cracks. And when we check in again later, the cracks have spidered out so hard. Because, yeah, it's like, it's not good for a society to be shaped around the exploitation of other people's labor and to have all your jobs and all your social roles all be oriented around this incredibly abusive, exploitative relationship. Like, that's not good for the individual or the collective psyche. And yeah, it's getting real bad. Even in this chapter, it's already getting real bad.
So why settle in Malden? Is it just because there's access to water and they've got food stores?
It's food, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
It's, as far as I can tell, it's because Malden did kind of the same thing as So Harbor and held on to a lot of food. And Savannah is literally showing up with 70,000 warriors and about that many Guy Shine. So she has 140,000 mouths to feed. Like, that, it's going to be difficult to carry that much food. And they've got more septs coming in. So there's water and food here. It's like, this is a spot to pause and just soak up all those resources before, I guess, making a beeline either for a bigger city or for the waste. I feel like that's kind of maybe, if Perrin didn't happen, I feel like Savannah and Tharava would have ended up splitting over let's go attack a big city versus let's go back to the waste.
Right. Because, well, that's definitely Tharava, the second she gets a chance to, is like, all right, everybody get your shit. We're going back to the waste. Round it up, and Savannah definitely is like, no, I want as much wealth as I can get. I'm going to take it. I can see Savannah settling down and becoming queen, right? I can see her fully finishing the transition to wetland ruler. Okay, I'm going to take Altara, right, or one of these countries that is not well held and not held by the Shanchan, maybe. One of these places in the middle. Yeah, just spread my influence, and I've got all these channelers. I can resist the Shanchan, and with all these slaves, I have wealth, and but she's clearly outclassed, right? So I think she would end up with a very small territory, but I think it is possible that's where Savannah would take the Shaido, which they would have been destroyed one way or another. I don't think they could have ever survived in the, meat grinder that is the Shanchan border land.
Yeah, this is an incredibly unsustainable way to run a civilization, even when there isn't an invading force that's hell-bent on taking over everything. Like, this is going to collapse into infighting and someone taking advantage of how weak and nonsense it is. The Shanchan are just going to be way at the front of the line to do that. And chat was asking us where she got all the gold belts and stuff, and I would assume she's just been stealing a bunch of gold jewelry and cashing it aside to spend on her 100-fold servant army.
And I'm sure she's got a couple of goldsmiths, servants Shaido gold, even Shaido goldsmiths, if she's not taking wetlander gold.
Oh, yeah. Aiel metal workers are, yeah.
So she's got plenty of gold. I don't think it would be that hard to make gold belts.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if they're, belt shiny gold links around her waist. Yeah.
It's a way of marking them out. And Savannah's all about status symbols. That's really all she's into it for, is the status symbols. And like, that's just, it's so unsustainable as a leadership strategy. But it is a brutally efficient trap, to return to the text. We also get this reminder that Wetlander Gaishan seem to stand outside the rules, which becomes brutally apparent by the end of the chapter.
Because they become Wetlander servants.
Right, because they're not Gaishan.
No.
They're enslaved forever.
Right.
They're less than human.
Because Gaishan would follow it of their own will. And you can't treat them as Gaishan, because Gaishan will, for a year and a day, do exactly what you tell them to do without trying to escape. These Wetlanders will try and escape. They are prisoners. They have to be treated like prisoners.
And it's like worse than prisoners, because they get treated like animals. It's amazing how quickly the Shaido go from the concept of Gaishan to animals, except... No, I'm countering myself. It's not, because they've been selling people into slavery in Shara for the past 2,000 years, give or take.
Kyrians especially.
Like, the only time we ever get mentions of slavery are specifically the Aiel deliberately handing people over to slavery while also maintaining their own Gaishan rhythm. So actually, it's not surprising that they make this transition so quickly. They just decide to be their own Sharans. Ew. God, the Aiel, I mean, granted, it's only the Shaido, but still, the Aiel are so complicated, because all the Aiel that were selling Kyrianan into Sharan slavery. That's all the Aiel. Only the Shaido are applying it to Wetlanders right now, in this moment, but, like, it comes from the broader Aiel culture, and that's icky. I hate it, though. I hate it.
So then everybody, all the channelers suddenly turn and look in one direction, because shockingly, Rand has started channeling. I sort of think of it as the gong moment or the rooster crow that sets off right before the bubble of evil hits.
Yeah.
And they all hear it. And it's sort of like the one moment that synchronizes all the storylines. And I feel like Jordan had been like, I've got all these storylines. They're all out of sync. How do I get them all back into sync? Oh, there's channelers everywhere. I'll have them all turn and look on the day in which Rand is channeling, and that will say to everybody, no matter how far out of sync these storylines have gone, at this moment, this is what's happening with all of these different storylines.
Yeah, totally. Like the Bale Scream later, but even more broadly applied to the whole cast rather than just to one random side plot.
I somehow missed the Bale Scream in my reread. I don't know how I did that. I was looking for it too. Must have just fallen asleep during those chapters or something.
That has been known to happen amongst us rereaders.
Yes. So I really am interested in keeping an eye out for it, because isn't that the echoing of Natrum's Barrow back through time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like supposed to be a time sync, but it only happens like to Faile and Perrin, so it doesn't really work as a time sync. But yeah, this is again like much more like the cock crowing in I think it's Shadow Rising. Mm-hmm. It's the opening of Shadow Rising. But yeah, this is very much that, because Faile is in the act of talking to this woman, and somewhere in the middle of her responding, the person she's responding to's attention suddenly gets yoinked to go look at this power thing. And she just stands there staring for several minutes while Faile awkwardly wonders what to do, and then, comes back to herself. And so, yeah, we know exactly what moment we are at. And Faile looks around and figures out that all of the channeling wise ones are struck by something, and she concludes that it means Perrin must have arrived and be channeling up on the ridge. She has no way of gauging the distance of how far away this thing is.
Right. Yeah.
As a non-channeler, she knows that they can feel maybe a mile or 5 away. Mm-hmm. Like, of course, it's not hundreds of leagues away. That's ridiculous.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be someone close by, so Perrin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in fairness, she's like, oh, Perrin, you definitely are coming after me. Also, don't catch me yet. I'm not ready. Like, she is so on to her own, I'm going to get myself out of this arc.
But yeah, and her being like, she's never doubted Perrin will follow her, because of course he would. but her like, I have to get away before he kills himself trying to rescue me, because these are overwhelming odds for anybody. Which is how most people think. You know, I think one of the things that gives Perrin his clout with his army is that he does do such a good job taking down the Shaido.
Oh, yeah. He takes an impossible situation and figures out how to make it not impossible. It's quite clever.
They lose almost nobody except for the Prophet's men.
Yeah, he doesn't lose any of the people he cares about. It's incredible, strategically speaking, that he manages to put all the losses on his own undesirables. We get some discussion about how the city was completely overwhelmed before they knew they were in danger, just to kind of remind us of not just Faile's context as a Geistshine, but also Malden's context as a geographic Geistshine, basically. The southern end of the city got basically burned down. Everywhere's been looted and turned inside out. Like, the whole city just got robbed in the most rude fashion.
But also a lot of information about the water system, right? This is the only source. A lot of information about the fact that this is the only source of water. All the Geistshine are getting buckets and bringing them out. There's no water source outside of the city. That's why the city is the way it is. There's this big cistern in the middle of it that we get to hang out in for a little while and hear all about. Like, yeah, it's a lot of detail about the water system, which, of course, will come into play later.
Yeah, and just another mention of the labor that the Geistshine are doing. Like, all of the water for 140,000 people's cooking and washing and cleaning is coming in buckets being carried by Geistshine. Like, that is how, aside from the laundry getting carried out to get washed, but like all the water that camp is using is being carried by humans with a pair of buckets slung over their shoulders.
What do you think? A million buckets of water a day?
It's far too much time for people to be spending on moving water for a reasonable civilization. It's ridiculous. I don't even know how to do the math for that, but it's obnoxious.
Well, I'm just thinking, you know, a bucket to wash in, a bucket to drink, a bucket to clean stuff with. You're talking, you know, minimum 5 buckets a person, right? Mm-hmm. And then, you know, some people are going to want more than that, so...
Yeah, Savannah's going to be having baths every day.
Right. You know, at 5 gallons a person, 140,000, or 5 buckets a person times 140,000, right? You're very quickly 700,000, something like that. So with a little bit of extra, yeah, million buckets very easily.
Yeah, that seems quite reasonable. And that's all being moved with human labor, because despite the fact that they had this fancy aqueduct and cistern and all this stuff, it's still apparently like the post-Roman Dark Ages, and engineering is not a thing, aside from this weird aqueduct that they just happen to have, which no other city in the entire books has. Just this one city. Nothing to see here. Definitely no foreshadowing. The one time we get an aqueduct mentioned.
Super Sky, like, I think this is a good point, that it doesn't seem logistically possible to carry 1 million buckets of water per day from one location, or even 3 locations. Like, I do feel like that is a bit of a flaw in the logic of just like, could these 3 locations provide enough water and enough just like time for people to fill up?
Well, they are Aiel, so much like the Fremen, they don't need as much water. So halve the number just off the top, because they're Aiel.
Okay, all right.
And they have +5 to water conservation.
Still, it's, you know, it does seem to be logistically just a little, whew.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Chat's also correcting me. Apparently, Caemlyn also has an aqueduct and cistern. So I guess I'm wrong that this isn't the only aqueduct. But yeah, it's a lot of mention of the system and Faile thinking of how to use it. And it's like, Perrin, check it out.
Well, and the whole point of having a cistern, right, is something that stores water and creates water pressure. Just in the same way that we have water towers in our cities, they're elevated because that way, if power goes out, the elevation itself creates pressure, and all of our faucets and everything continue to work, at least until the water that's been pumped into the water tower runs out. right? So that's where modern day power and engines come into it, is we can just have a water tower wherever the fuck we want it and create an artificial lake up in the sky. But what they had is an aqueduct and cisterns, which took a water at a higher elevation and channeled it to their city at a lower elevation, but kept it high enough to create water pressure for the whole city. And so that's what the cistern is for. And so you're not just pulling water from one location, which is very much what it sounds like they're doing here. But so I'm going to assume that perhaps what we're not hearing about is that the water goes to lots of different locations in the city from the cistern.
That would make sense to me.
That the cistern is elevated and all the water flows into that. And then you just have, a couple of locations that you can fill up from around the city, public fountains, wells, and such. Right.
You could even have some like rudimentary, like not indoor plumbing, but yeah, like citywide plumbing. Like, oh yeah, every block has an outlet or something.
Has an outlet
like
for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was really common in old Roman cities, right? That's why they have these big aqueducts that we still, see, is they had an aqueduct flowing from a higher elevation, and they use that higher elevation to create water pressure for their cities.
Right. Yeah. Because their cities kept burning down. Actually, that's not the reason. They did it because water's good. But their cities did keep burning down, unrelatedly.
Yeah. Well, when you don't have electricity and your only source of heat and light is fire. Yeah.
Yeah, and your primary building material is wood. But yeah, it's Roman aqueducts are so cool. I mean, the part where their cement and stonework is just still there. Just cruising, just chilling. I mean, some of it's broken, but some of it's just like, what's up? It's so cool. So cool.
Did you hear how they recently figured out why Roman concrete was, or at least the stuff has lasted so long, whereas our stuff tends to crumble?
Salt water? Ocean water? Right?
So it's actually, they mix in limestone, and the limestone, when it gets wet with salt water, reacts and like heals cracks. And like, it was a science about how the limestone was a slightly bigger rock than the rest of the material, so cracks tended to form where the limestone was, and then the limestone itself would, especially in salt water, dissolve a little bit, soak, and that calcium would then soak into the cracks and sort of create a self-healing rock.
Wow. Yeah, I only knew that there was the revelation of, you have to use salt water in your mix in order to make it work. I didn't understand any of the chemistry beyond, the salt water is magic. But that's clever. So you get self-healing masonry, so to speak.
Yeah, and it has to do with, but it's a combination of the grain size of the limestone in order to encourage the cracks to form where it can self-heal.
Oh, yes. Oh, that's so cool. Oh, that's neat. I want to build something out of that now.
And go read actual science about that. I'm very much paraphrasing.
I'll throw a link into the description of something that seems decently reputable that discusses this. I like to fact check us when we make big, bold claims. So you can always check the episode description. If we made a big, bold claim, there will probably be a citation in that.
Oh, yeah. And we don't, Dan is also saying, we don't use salt in our concrete because it eats the steel rebar. They didn't have any rebar reinforcement, right? And we do.
Because it was not yet the age of steel. That makes sense. Like you were saying a few episodes ago, how does knowledge get lost? So easily.
Yeah, it does really easily.
Okay, so we meet up with Choedan of Bane and Choedan. We're only meeting up with Choedan. It's like the only time we ever see one of them alone. It's very strange, but we'll get through it together. Choedan reports that Lucille and Aradia are 3 days gone and escaped, and this is a cause for great hope and celebration, and it will be dashed by Aravine in like 2 pages when she shows Faile naked Lucille and Aradia tied up in camp.
But actually, it's one of this, this chapter, so it's like sets up this big, like, they got away. No, hope is gone. There's no chance. And that's why, when Faile talks about getting away, I think she could get out of camp, but I think if Perrin wasn't right there to protect her, she would be hunted down and returned, right? Like, I don't think she has a chance of getting away without someone there to shelter her or some place to escape to.
Agreed. She only has the ability to slip their clutches in the short term. Like long term, she needs outside support.
And why do you think Perrin didn't come across Lucille and Aradia?
a really bad twist of timing because they got here 4 days ago. Lucille and Arla left 3 days ago. They were brought back today. Perrin, I believe, is only scouting their camp for the first time today. So it's like by a matter of 24 hours, maybe, is how they missed each other. Like, it almost worked. They so close.
If they'd left a couple of days later, Perrin would have been camped right outside and they would have run right into his camp. Yeah,
absolutely. I think that if only Faile had been a little less efficient at convincing them to leave.
And perhaps led the Shaido right into their camp, revealing that Perrin was there.
Which would have been a much faster way to resolve this plot. Sorry, everyone who would have died, but like it would have been faster.
It would have been, yes, it would have been faster. There's no doubt about that. Wow. Okay. We just wouldn't have a Perrin plot anymore.
No, because he's basically done everything useful at this point.
So Bane basically says, I'm not going to try and escape because they've got a year and a day. After that, I'm getting the fuck out of here, but they've got me for a year and a day. But I'll help you because you really shouldn't be Guy Shine to the Shaido.
Yeah, and Faile basically asks her, we learn for the second time, well, if you're willing to help us this much, why not the rest of the way? Why wouldn't you just run away with us and help us survive? And Choedan's like, because I have a code of conduct, bitch, and walks away. And Faile thinks about how even though she doesn't follow Giotto, she understands that she just insulted her friend and is going to need to apologize for the sake of their friendship, not for the sake of keeping help. It's a very, like, I just don't get social niceties. So I appreciate that Faile explains this very directly because I would not have followed that line of reasoning at all from the dialogue on the page.
It's basically like saying, well, why don't you just fuck a donkey, right? Like, and what? That's offensive. I would never do that. Really? Why not? You know, like
from Choedan's perspective.
You have to apologize. Yeah. From Choedan's perspective, that's what it feels like. It's just this like non sequitur, totally disrespectful, gross thing that she would never do. And just because the Shaido are doing it doesn't mean I'm going to do it. Right.
Which is then in sharp contrast to Enadric, who we meet later in the chapter, saying, Savada takes what she wants and I take what I want. It is the new way. We've got Choedan saying, no, the old ways are what kept our people going, and that is what I will hold to, regardless of the people around me.
Chat wants to know why my brain went straight to fucking a donkey. I have no idea.
You might want to take that up with your therapist.
I might have to, yeah.
Or not. I mean, some questions we don't want answered.
That's true. Some questions they have to report you for.
This is the real reason I didn't get help when I was a teenager. I was like, I just have to tell them whatever they need to hear to tell my parents to chill out. So anyway... There's this really sad line about how the Shaido allowed the residents of Malden to fight the fire that they themselves had started. But then they were like, oh, you people that saved the town and worked really hard, you're going to be the best servants. We're absolutely not letting you go at all because they don't do gratitude.
But I love how they also stopped them for a while being like, no, don't waste that water on putting out that fire. That's good water. Why would you waste it on putting out the fire? And they were like, because otherwise everything's going to burn down. Like, we've got plenty of water. It just comes down the river, like, through the aqueduct. Let us use it. And the Shaido are fine. Like, fine. We're gonna enslave you afterwards.
Right. Yeah, because they let some of the people from Malden go because they do follow some rules. They let, women who are pregnant or have dependent children leave. They let the blacksmiths leave for reasons which nobody understands. But the blacksmiths are very grateful. They're like, I feel like I'd be a good candidate for being picked, but for some reason, my choice of profession when I was 13 is saving me. This is fine. So they all bail, except for the firefighters and everyone else who doesn't get to leave.
And the city gets looted, right?
The city gets so looted. And Faile has this line here. Aiel had no interest in cities except as storehouses to be plundered, which is, I believe, inaccurate on purpose. Jordan is making the point that, yes, it's just the Shaido, but also they're representing all the Aiel in Faile's mind, and this is going to be a problem for the Westlands. It has been a problem for the Westlands that Aiel depredations are actually just Shaido depredations, but this is going to continue to have echoes into the Fourth Age, I think, where the Aiel are trying to be peacekeepers, but what the Shaido did has sort of tarnished their reputation for a very long time. Aiel just see cities this way.
Something Rand's constantly contending with is just the idea that the Shaido savages are killing and looting, and you combine that with the fact that there are Shaido out there doing it who look like Aiel, but then there's also just a bunch of bandits and Dragonsworn doing it just to make money, or just to survive, really, at this point, right? Because with all the food going bad.
The food hasn't started going bad yet, has it?
Ooh, that is a good question.
I think it starts happening as the heart of winter thaws and spring starts to arrive, but I might be wrong. It might have started by now.
I feel like at this point, at least food is somewhat scarce.
Yes, because of the way that winter didn't come for the longest time, like the harvest got all fucked. And yes, the food shortages are starting, but I don't think the mysterious spoilage has started yet.
Fair enough. But yeah, chat is saying, what's the Ninevite?
Naivete and naive, so yeah.
Yep,
Naivete.
I got there eventually. All right, so Naivete was saying, it's in a couple of chapters.
Okay, so it is this book. We are right around at the point where that starts. Because the rats are starting to show up in the White Tower. The food's going to start going bad. Okay.
Maybe with removing the taint on the Cyndane, Rand is, by removing that bit of evil from the world, he's creating less pressure, and that allows the Dark One to come in a little bit more, right? Because there's less of the Dark One in the world, so that sort of opens the door a little bit because there's less counter pressure.
I was thinking also maybe it has to do with like the strain on him and how much closer it takes him into Darthrand space, and like the land and the dragon being one.
Right.
Like maybe the corrosive effect of doing this also corrodes like the land a little bit. That's true.
He does pump an awful lot of taint through him to do the cleansing of the source, right? That's one thing that we don't talk about is like he bathes in the taint in order to pump it into Shadar Logoth. He basically has to channel all of, or enough of it at least to get the siphon effect started, right? Enough to start pulling off more of it. But like, that's a lot of taint. That's the whole reason he's using the Choedan Call, is to channel a lot of power in order to move a lot of taint. And all of that's going through him.
Yeah, so I feel like that would weaken the land a little bit in regards to it being connected to Rand's soul.
And think about when we see Nynaeve look in his brain, right? She describes the darkness over his brain as bigger than anything she's seen in anybody else, right? He sucks down more of the taint in his 2 years than any of the other Ashaman or Logain or Taim, right? And this is why, right? He's channeling so much power through the Choedan Call that he's also getting, a level up in his insanity after this point.
Yeah, I feel like there's no way that this doesn't mark a stair-step increase in his descent. Or decrease in his ascent? I don't know. Words.
The rate of, the second derivative is positive. The rate at which the rate is changing is positive.
Yeah. Exactly. So the next thing I have is rapey McAiel face showing up.
Yeah, you're very pretty.
And I want to point out, initially in this interaction, she feels no fear. And this is something that I hadn't noticed until Allie and Gus pointed it out. But Robert Jordan has a thing with having women feel very, very secure and safe, and then immediately ripping that out from under them. And I'd never noticed that, but I noticed that here. She thinks, oh, I'm totally safe and fine. And then
I'm Guy Shine. They wouldn't touch Guy Shine.
And then immediately get disabused of that and put into a situation where she is like seriously traumatized by the end of the encounter. And it's just, it's nasty. I think he does a good job with depicting the stomach churning horror of this interaction. I've always hated it at a level that feels very visceral. So I think he did a good job writing it, but ugh.
And just how helpless he is, the way he picks her up, the way he crushes her face against his gut just to keep her from screaming. Like, he manhandles her like she's not even there.
Right.
And I think that's the terrifying part of it, is just the shocking degree and strength difference.
Right. If you weigh 120, 30 pounds and have decent strength for throwing knives, and a 300-pound shot putter decides to have his way with you, you're a flutter. You're nothing in the face of that. And then she thinks well, where are the two maidens? Surely they'll stop him. The guy Shine won't stop him. And it's just we get into this bystander effect of this man is so big and strong that only people with social status on par with him are going to do anything. He's far too large for anyone to physically do anything.
Well, that's why they're weight classes. That's why they exist, right? Because it's fundamentally not a fair fight between someone bigger and someone smaller.
Yeah, totally. And she's fighting for all she's worth. She's not holding back because Guy Shine, but it doesn't matter because he's 5 times her amplitude in this whole situation.
So in walks Roland in his heroic, questionable,
lesser of two evils.
Right. He threw her into a pit of snakes and then kind of keeps the snakes off of her. It's okay, thank you, I guess. Right. I didn't want to get bitten by those snakes, but you know how I could have not gotten bitten by those snakes? If you hadn't thrown me in this pit full of snakes.
Right. It's obviously you're going to take the hand that's reaching down to pull you out, even if that hand was last seen shoving you in. You're relieved, but also you want to punch him so bad.
There's just enough redeeming of Roland to make you feel almost bad when Perrin kills him. And then you think about it for 2 seconds and goes, no. Good job, Perrin.
Yeah. RJ makes a good effort at making Roland relatable, but it's not enough. No. He could have let her go. When that whole original kidnapping encounter happened, he could have been no, I'm not taking them. I killed the horse. That's good enough. Now you run back to wherever you came from. He didn't do that, so he forfeits our sympathy.
Or he could just not be with the Shaido, right?
I mean, he could be fighting for Rand.
Well, yeah. And I get why. I see the tragedy of the Shaido, or of the Brotherless, and why they feel they can't follow him, and why they feel, they've violated some honor, and that following Rand isn't necessarily the right way to go about restoring that honor.
Yeah. It's a tough situation.
But I don't see how going to join the Shaido is the honorable way to get back from that, right? Do something else. Go serve somewhere.
I don't think it's for honor's sake. I think it's for community's sake. I think it's a matter of your society is ripping itself apart and you expect to be part of that fabric, and you pick a side because you don't want to go freelance culturally. And then you have to decide that was a bad call. Which Roland seems to have basically achieved that for himself. He's still complicit in the system, but he's plotting his exit strategy because he's decided was not a good decision. But I can understand why at the beginning people didn't decide to go unaffiliated like the Aes Sedai, right? Because the Aes Sedai have a sense of this is temporary and we're going to come back together. So I get why a third of them just sit it out because it's just politics. But the Shaido rifting is on par with when the Tuatha'an and the Aiel split, right? This is a you don't come back from it kind of cultural split. So I can see why people were reluctant to freelance day one. But also, him and some of his friends are deciding to go freelancing shortly at this point. So
yeah, it's just a little too late.
It's much too late. And yet, he also does save her from being abused in an alley for a couple of hours. So there's an attempt at a redemption arc that makes us feel complicated. Kinda. Not really.
And the way he protects her is by claiming ownership, by basically saying, I took her Guy Shine, she's my Guy Shine, don't you touch her, mine.
And he also plays into just basic, male primate dominance with the exact same script. You don't get to have her because I claim her. It's all about possession and domination and just the most base. Ugh. But also, if she's going to be predated on by big giant men, then like having a big giant man waving his dick around to mark the turf is fighting fire with fire quite effectively, unfortunately.
But at the same time, you know, I think we see her true thoughts here when she thinks she thought she would have screamed if he touched her. And that's referring to Roland. Oh, yeah. Her traumatized response here at the end is, it really tells you how much she went from no fear to all the fear. Because Roland is very carefully and wisely stepping back from her and not touching her. And she's like, damn right, you don't touch me right now or express sympathy, because I will shatter into a million pieces at an extremely high decibel level. And that, you know, she's a very strong character that compartmentalizes a lot, but that lets you know how shaken she is. So she gathers up all the laundry, all the skirts dividing for riding. They're not pants, but they're not pants. And they're made of silk. And they're all silk because they're all Sylvanas clothing. And she's basically carrying them to the wash. I thought there was an interesting line here where she figures out that Roland has been following her. Roland had his chance at that, forcing her, when he had her naked and bound, and he could have been looking at a fence post then. Perhaps he did not like women in that way. Sort of a little bit of a backhand mention of homosexuality in Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time. Yes, casual reference to the fact that people are gay. Right. That happens. Right. Maybe he's one of those. Right. Not a big deal, just part of her strategizing, because she has to figure out if sex appeal is a tool she can use or not on him. Right. So, again, I think we have to give just Jordan a little bit of praise for at least casually mentioning someone might not be straight in a series, just as a backhand, you know. Yeah, it's nice. Not a compliment, but what am I trying to say? It's just a casual reference. It's normalization. He's just normalizing. Casual reference. Yeah, that's a good one. There we go. Thank you. Yeah, and it's not for the male gaze either, which is also nice. So yeah, basically she decides, regardless of his sexuality, maybe she can leverage the friendship nubbin that they've got going here to get a little help to get out, because Bane and Choedan have said we can help you this far but no farther. She's like, well, maybe I can turn Roland into an ally that can help me for the next steps. And then quickly he's like, oh no, but sex appeal will super work on me. Just FYI. Right. Yeah. Actually, it does, I'm open. It does kind of crush the whole earlier mention of the line, because Roland's like, oh no, I will totally fuck you. Yeah. No, because, you know, what happens in other zip codes doesn't count. Yeah. If you're in a different zip code, it's not cheating. It's not cheating. Yeah, for sure. By the way, smile. It makes you look pretty. He totally brings out that line. Smile. Smile suits your face. Laughter was suited even better. I would like to see it. Yeah, no, it's hard to have any sympathy for Roland when he gets killed by Perrin. He is digging his own grave. He's less of a creepy, nice guy, nasty person than Talonvor by like this much. He's very much like Talonvor in the like, oh, I just happen to love you and haunt around you, and I'll do anything for you as long as you give me a chance of a little bit of hope that I might get a tiny bit of some. It's less pathetic than Talonvor, but it's still like, no, you're a creep. Go away. The woman has her own story arc to experience. Well, of course, then Faile's like, oh, actually, I should probably flirt with him to get what I want. She's like, it's going to be a problem because I just told him how much I love my husband. So, let me build up to that a little slowly. Yeah. And also you see here, there's at the very end, right before they escape, she decides that she's going to flirt with him to whatever degree is necessary. She's like, well, Perrin's never going to have to know what I did to escape. Perrin immediately kills him, like a page after she has that thought. Right here, she says, not that she had any intention of going that far. Mm-hmm. Right? So this is another part of what I hate about the Roland arc, is how much Faile ends up compromising herself by little tiny bits and pieces from her initial stance that she's just going to flirt, show a little ankle, and that's it. That is it. That is all she is going to do. And by the end, she is so desperate that she's like, fuck it, I'll sleep with him if I have to. Right.
And she doesn't have to, but the fact that she goes through that decision-making process from this high and mighty moral standpoint down to that, like, that is part of the ickiness of what Roland puts on her by making this offer here and now and not helping her escape sooner, mind you. Like, it's just, she really doesn't want to, and she does it to survive, and she feels so tainted by that. And I hate it. I hate being in her head for it. Before I forget, I do want to remind our listeners of our affiliate partner thing, Queerencia.co. They're doing a summer pride box thing, which apparently makes sense to other people. Tarvalin After Dark made a better pitch for this than I did, and I edited it, so I'm attempting to tell you what they told their audience. The apparel, swag at a price. Go to Queerencia.co/WOTS, and money for reasons. I'm never going to write this down and do it like a professional.
Okay, what you need to do is take the one from Tarvalin After Dark and just insert it in right here.
TVAD has a sponsor, and it's a great sponsor that's running. This is actually new since the last time we talked about this.
Ooh.
It's really cool. They're doing Pride boxes. Let me show you guys. If you go to Queerencia.co, and you can do this at home and follow along, Queerencia.co, you'll see on the very front page the Pride 2023 collection, which they have these really cool boxes featured there where you can see you get a bunch of shit, including some really cool bags, shirts, hats, fans.
I love boxes of shit.
Yeah, and it's a great way to get a bunch of stuff cheaper than it would be getting it all together. Mm-hmm. So definitely go there and check that stuff out.
Hell yeah.
And you can do it and you get a discount. So this is the best thing. If you go there, you go to Queerencia.co/WOTS. You will get 10% off your order.
Yes.
So do that.
Oh, these are nice things.
They are. I mean, it's really cool looking stuff, and they ship everywhere.
I mean, literally, when I just went to it, it said, "Are you in Korea?" I was like, "Yes," and there we go. Now I'm in Korea. Yep.
So it's really cool stuff. Those boxes come, and yeah, it's exciting. So Queerencia.co/WOTS. Get 10% off your order. Get ready for Pride season. It's coming up here in June. Cool.
Get ready.
Get ready for the gays.
Get ready for the gays. We're coming for you.
Oh, gosh. Wow. All right.
Thank you so much, TVAD, for helping us out with that sales pitch.
The next thing I think is the description of the cistern, which I'm going to read because I think it's the most important part of the Malden battle.
Yay, engineering to take us away from this gross shit.
At the eastern end of the square, what looked like a section of the city's outer wall, gray and 30 feet high, was actually the wall of a huge cistern fed by an aqueduct. 4 pumps, each worked by a pair of men, gushed out water to fill the buckets. A good bit more splashing to the paving stones than the men would have dared allowed had they known Roland was close enough to see. Faile had considered crawling through the tunnel-like aqueduct to escape, but they had no way of keeping anything dry, and wherever it let them out, they would be soaking wet, and more likely to freeze to death than make it more than a mile or two in the snow. There were 2 other places in the city to get water, both fed by stone conduits underground. So I'm assuming from the aqueduct. So basically, she goes over to where they're heating up water and does laundry there. Right by the opening.
Yeah, and Alejandra is already there, so we get to revisit her and do a little recap paragraph of the fact that she's there. And then we get, the longest and most useless digression into how to clean silk. I don't know about the rest of you, but I do not come to fantasy literature for instructions on laundry. I don't need to know how to clean silk. But it's embedded in a conversation about how they're going to escape. So there's probably some kind of analogy for the moral stain of sleeping with the enemy as you escape from the situation versus grinding the ash into the silk. And I'm just not smart enough to see it.
No, that's good because I saw nothing. I like that. I like that moral stain that she has to, be very careful not to grind in. And she's always, she's very careful to get just enough of the stain on her that she can wash it off later. It's not, she doesn't want to grind it in if she was to really sleep with Roland. The little flirting is getting the stain on there, but you can still wash it off.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I jest, but also I do see the staining of the laundry as allegorical for what's happening, because there's a whole big thing about how the laundry gets spilled when Nadric grabs her, right? So that's the initial impungement on her reputation, right? She gets pulled into an alley, and then she gets brought out with Roland, and she gets the laundry, but then Alejandra points out, oh, your actual clothes are dirty. It looks like you rolled around on your back and had sex with someone. That's what it looks like. And then Faile, when she comes out of the alley, also she picks up the clothes and is like, well, I'm really glad no one stepped on these while I was in there, because that would have ground the ash in more. So she picks it up and is really, really careful to get the ash off. And then she goes and washes them, is careful not to grind it in. And there's just, she works so hard, right, to reel Roland along, to keep Alejandra from knowing what actually happened, to hide the assault, to comfort her liegewomen, to manage all these different factors. I mean, freaking dark friend alert, Aravine shows up in this chapter, right? The stain of both reputation and mistrust, and there's just the ash. I find generally when authors or movie directors use ashy landscapes, it always works allegorically. If they want to cover everything in ash and soot, it's always allegorical. It always works. And there's everything from her personal discomfort at betraying her marriage through the violation of almost being assaulted. That's all of that is a reputation stain for women and but I don't know that we needed this much description of how literally cleaning silk works also.
We get a timestamp in there, 2 weeks, 22 days, because again, a week is 10 days. So 2 weeks is 20 days plus 2. So it's a bit of an awkward, only 2 weeks, 22 days to be exact. And you're like, wait, 2 weeks? That's 3 weeks and a day in our time. But nope, if it's 10-day weeks, it's just 2 days.
Yeah. Yeah, but it is nice that he puts "to be exact" on the page. He's like, I understand you're confused, dear reader, but I'm being precise here.
But I bet anyone who read that without realizing that a week was 10 days would go, he meant 3. Only 3 weeks. 20, because 22 days to be exact would be 3 weeks plus a day, right? So I think the first time I read that, I assumed that was a typo, and he meant to say only 3 weeks there. She talks about the 3 traps, right? The first trap being Savannah finding out that she's close to Rand. Mm-hmm. The second, and here she talks about the second trap, which is just basically despondency.
Yeah, giving in to the mental conditioning, accepting the situation, losing, basically becoming a Damani. I was really seeing a lot of her thoughts here as being I don't want to become like what we know Damani become when they're held to the collar and magically brainwashed. Which is a real fear. I mean, however much I critique Jordan for having his slaves all be happy with their situation, Faile is articulating social conditioning is a thing, and she's being very effectively conditioned at this point. And her and Alejandra having to beat each other on Savannah's order, but also maintain the hierarchy between them in their private relationship. It's difficult. It would be depressing to watch all of that sliding away.
Mm-hmm. And she does talk about a third trap at one point. I forget what that is.
That's Galena.
Galena. That's what I figured.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because basically we get to revisit the Galena trap here because Faile asks Alejandra, where's Magden? And the answer is Magden is trying to steal the ivory rod for Galena. We learned that she failed at that, but, Galena shows up and reminds us how dangerous of a trap she is.
Galena knew who Faile was, knew who her husband was, and Perrin's connection to Rand al'Thor, and she threatened to reveal it to Savannah unless Faile and her friends stole something from the very tent she slept in. That was the third trap, lying in wait for them.
So they're standing at the table doing silk laundry, talking about how Magden should have shown up by now. Galena shows up emphasizing the point that Magden should have arrived by now. It's now afternoon. And what is going on? At which point
Magden shows up.
At which point Magden actually shows up mid-afternoon and is like, I will literally kill Tharava because she tortured me, but also she tortured me super casually because the Choedan call went off, I think, basically when she got caught. So she just kind of tied Magden up, left her for later, and then came back and was like, I don't even remember what you were doing. Just get out of my sight. You know, it's a saved by the bell sort of situation, but it's the Choedan call, and Magden still got tied up for hours. So we learned that Galena's secret is still safe. The rod is still secure and not in Galena's possession. And Galena basically starts to assault Magden in frustration, and then Aravine inserts herself into the situation and introduces herself to the cast.
And I feel like Aravine's really there to be a counter to Magden. Like, they're both getting stiffer and harder, right? They've both become and there's just a lot of mentions of how Magden is very queen-like, right? Because we know that's actually Queen Morghese.
Right. There's a mention of how she's getting treated like Faile and Alejandra despite not being nobility. But she keeps getting kind of lumped in with the two of them because she behaves the same way. And it's like, Faile, if you weren't so tired, I think you might be wondering about this.
Right. Another down on out of her luck queen.
Right. She's getting harder than Alejandra even. And it's just, And Aravine never tells her story properly, but it seems like, she's in that same position of being a disgraced noble who doesn't want to talk about her past at all. And also, so I actually hadn't seen her as a foil for Magden. I was wondering if she actually had gotten a new Dark Friend assignment recently. And that's where her invigoration has come from. Because it says she had been weary-eyed and resigned the first time Faile saw her. The intervening days had stiffened her even more than they had Magden. And Aravine had been Gaishain for a while when they joined the party. So my little headcanon I've always held is that when the dark side finds out where Faile is and that there's a competent dark friend near her, she gets a dark friend message saying, attach yourself to this woman and be her loyal servant and wait for further instructions. Because Aravine is the one that betrays the horn later.
Okay.
Aravine is the one who betrays Faile to getting dropped off in the blight when she's got the horn. And it's only because she is so well trusted by Faile that she's able to do that betrayal. I think that the Dark just planted her on Faile at this point, and that's why she's been invigorated from her dull-eyed resignation. That's my headcanon.
For some reason, it completely slipped my mind that Aravine was a Dark Friend.
Dark Friend alert! Woo,
Dark Friend alert, thank you, yeah.
And I believe that, I don't know why I think this, but I feel like she says to Faile or something that she was a Dark Friend for a long time. Like, I don't know where I got that impression, but I feel like when she confesses to Faile, like, I'm sorry, I really liked you, but this was my life before, and I thought that I was going to get a break, but...
I don't remember that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's in a Brandon Sanderson passage, but... Yeah, I really like watching for Aravine now on my rereads because that's such a profound betrayal, and she does express that it was her old life catching up with her. So it's not like she becomes a Dark Friend during the books. She was a Dark Friend before the books ever started.
But this is her first appearance right here.
No, the first time she showed up was when she handed Faile that belt in the snow, when Faile was first being inducted into the Order of Gaishain. Aravine was the one who handed over the belt and collar, and that's why she is the one leading Faile to see Lucille and Arela, because Faile thinks to herself, how could she know to connect the three of us? And Aravine says, you forget, I was there the day you were taken. So this is the second time we've seen Aravine.
So while dying, Aravine confesses she had hoped not to serve the Dark One despite swearing her oaths, but felt she had no choice when she was reactivated. So she basically was one of those who did it because, hey, I wanted a little more extra power in the White Tower. Let me join the secret society. I'm sure Hitler will never come back. Oh, whoops.
So do you think that this completely torpedoes my headcanon that she got a Dark Friend assignment to attach herself to Faile?
Do
Do you think she attached herself to Faile just organically as a desire to reinvent herself, not on the orders of flame eyes in her dreams?
No, I think this is her reactivation.
Okay, chat, feel free to weigh in on this too. People in the comments, feel free to weigh in on this too. Because
we've got Galena, right? And I know Galena never thinks it, but that's a dark friend walking around. Maybe she activated another dark friend who she knew was an Aes Sedai and said, hey, I need you to attach yourself to Faile.
Aravine's not an Aes Sedai. Aravine's just some merchant or noble or some random woman. She's not an Aes Sedai.
I thought she was the Aes Sedai that made the gateway. I'm sorry. I confused her with Brishida.
Oh, Brishida. Yeah. The one who gets stabbed in the foot with a crystal?
Yep.
Yeah, no.
Because I always think that I speculate that she was a dark friend because she sent them to the Blight, right? Why else would she be thinking of the Blight at that moment?
It's a very confusing betrayal. I don't understand mechanically how it worked.
And then Aravine stabs her, right?
Yeah.
So
maybe they're both dark friends.
Well, I think they're both dark friends.
Right.
And that's what they set this up. So I think that's where my confusion comes from, because I think they're both dark friends involved in the abduction of the horn.
Okay. But yeah, it's when does Aravine get reactivated? Is it here, like I think, or is it sometime later after the Dark realizes where she is and she actually attached herself to Faile organically? Like, because she's very loyal to Faile. She's very Shiriam-like in the part where she actually sincerely does her job and is not trying to let the Lord of Chaos rule.
I think she is happier when she's just doing her job, right?
Like, yes.
Yeah. But I think she is forced to betray in the end.
Right. The question is just, does she join Faile of her own free will or because she was told to? That's what I'm wondering. Because she likes working for Faile, but Shiriam likes working for Egwene, and that wasn't her choice. So.
Yeah. And I think this chat is disagreeing with me about Berisha being a dark friend. And I'm like, I think that's totally... you could headcanon that one either way.
I mean, Aravine stabs her so that way no one can replicate the gateway. Doesn't really have a bearing on if she was a dark friend or not. Like, the point is that the gateway maker is out of commission.
Right. I think the making of the gateway going to the Blight is one where you can be like, she wouldn't have done that unless she was a dark friend, but she also got stabbed through the foot, so maybe she was influenced by the thing that stabbed her, or maybe just she made her think of the Blight for a second.
Or maybe, like, the literal fabric of space-time got shifted and the spot that wasn't the Blight was the Blight because the world literally is melting at the seams by that point in the plot.
Yeah, totally. Lots of options.
But yeah. Anyway, this is Aravine introducing herself as a friendly person who we feel like we should trust. Faile feels like she can trust her at the end, vaguely. Because basically what she does is she gives Faile a little bit of a heads up on how fucked she is, and then swears fealty to her while also sort of holding her at gunpoint. And it's like, you will accept my oath.
Right. But this is the reveal that Lucille and Ariella never got away. Even though, in the beginning of the chapter, we're told they'd been gone for 3 days. And here we find out, no, they were captured and brought back. And they're being punished for running away.
They were brought back this morning. So they did make it longer out of captivity than almost any of the other escapees. Because everyone else gets brought back like in the first day. They made it for 2 days. But they still got brought back. So even the best that Faile has to offer can't make it more than a couple days out of camp. Like, that lets her know exactly how much of a hurdle she needs to overcome.
And they're hogtied, right? So naked and hogtied, which is what, hands and feet tied up behind you.
Yeah.
And we see from Faile's POV how awful that actually is.
Yeah. Which, like, I mean, my spine loves getting bent that direction, like doing like a big bow pose in yoga or something where you grab your ankles and like stretch. Sure. But to be tied in such a fashion for
unable
hours.
To relax out of it. Yeah.
Oh my God.
In the freezing cold.
Can't even imagine how painful that must be. Like, ugh. And then, on top of that, to be exposed to the elements without any clothes. Like, It's a wonder the Aiel don't kill more of their prisoners with these quote-unquote punishments.
They do have Wise One healing, right? So
They do.
I imagine if people get close to death, they do have the ability to do some healing. Do the Shaido have healing, though? Isn't that something that, like, very few of the Wise Ones could do pre-Randall Thor?
Yeah, but I would assume that at least one Wise One in every clan has an extra special way with herbs. So I would assume the Shaido have at least one, unless she was one of the ones that got killed at Dumai's Wells, in which case they are now shit out of luck. And we certainly never get mention of the Wise Ones of the Shaido doing any healing, as that I can recall. I also love here how Faile has this woman's hands in hers, is looking down at this woman who's trying to get her to swear to take her oath of fealty, and is thinking, a dead woman can betray nothing. Like, looking into Aravine's eyes, calculating how difficult it would be to hide her body. And how her knife isn't even in arm's reach. And so I guess I'm going to accept your oath and become friends with you anyway. Like, Faile is so cold.
She's pretty ruthless, yeah.
I love how practical she can be when she has to be.
Oh, here's a little bit that makes me think that, again, Galena and Aravine might be working together. Only Galena knew the truth, or so she thought. And so she asks, who have you told? Listen, my lady, I overheard Galena speaking to you once. And I have told no one, right? So the idea that she actually overheard Galena speaking to Faile seems pretty out there. I think it's more likely that Galena actually ordered her directly to look over Faile and told her that she had given Faile orders to steal the rod. Does that make sense?
No, you think that Galena knows Aravine is a dark friend?
Yeah, I do.
Why? Dark friends don't know each other, hardly.
Not all the time, but sometimes they do.
Galena never thinks of having any dark friend allies to work with.
No, that's a good point.
I mean, I like it. I just feel like Galena would have done some mustache twirling over it.
But I'm just like, what are the chances that Aravine actually overheard that conversation versus being told about that conversation?
I mean, and the name she is citing for her explanation is a dark friend.
Is a dark friend who told her, yeah. And she's also a dark friend, right? Like, so...
Yeah.
I think, I think it's highly likely that there was a conversation that went on between Galena and Aravine off screen.
So you think that Galena asked or told Aravine to pal up with, befriend, ally with Faile just as a general insurance policy, or to do something specifically?
To make sure that they were trying to get the rod. Because she offers to help, right?
Aravine asks to be taken away when Faile goes. I don't think she offers to help with anything. Yeah, she just asks to get away.
Oh, okay.
Which I feel like Galena would have thought to herself something about, like, I have, like, layers upon layers of insurance.
I'll admit it's a stretch. The way this was phrased, where you have her saying the information came from another dark friend.
Yeah.
I happened to overhear. That just has me being like, really? You happened to overhear? That seems weird.
Well, the other way to fit that together is to say that she got, some fire-eyed vision in her dreams that she knows is a missive from a dark manager.
Right.
Telling her to do this. And then, you can just say that you heard Galena say it because,
certainly we know dark friends are being told about Perrin, right? Mm-hmm. So who's to say that she didn't just know about Perrin from the visions in her mind, and then she overheard Abara and went, ooh, oh, I bet that's Perrin's wife. I should keep an eye on her. Yeah,
because we get to emphasize that no one in the Aiel camp knows the name Bashir or whatever. And so, when the name Abara comes up, it's like, that's what she's been hiding. And there is dark friendery afoot.
Yes.
But they're hiding the details, so we're having a hard time being sure what's happening. And, I mean, also, only Galena knew the truth means that Galena could have reported it up the chain and then had that information get trickled down to Aravine, not directly to Galena.
Sure.
Like, there's so many ways. Like if one dark friend knows something, all the dark friends could know it, but we might never be able to say how the information traveled there because they have such a diffuse, like, I'm assuming that dark friends in general have the whole heart system, not just the Aes Sedai. Maybe slightly different, but
it might be different. I think that's just Aes Sedai.
Well, probably the higher up you go in the dark friend, like MLM, probably.
Right. I think low-level dark friends might know about each other because it's just a gang of guys hanging out, being like, yeah, let's the murder hobos that follow Matt in. Like,
sure, yeah, because they're just like a motorcycle gang or a bunch of punks or whatever. They're not like, oh yes, I'm consorting with literal Satan on cosmic levels. They're just like getting paid or whatever.
Here, Faile is asking Aravine, do you know anyone else can be trusted? And Aravine's like, no, not really. And I think that might be dark friendery, just like isolating her.
I don't think so, because she ends up being the head of the entire like army of people that insist on swearing fealty and running away. I think she just genuinely doesn't have anyone else she can trust with this.
Oh, all right.
You really
want to... Yeah. I really want to make some significance here.
No, I think Aravine is just... She hasn't had anything to organize or anyone to organize with. And, you know... But people keep adding themselves to Faile's party over the course of this arc. And Aravine is kind of her bannerman, second in command for managing that group. So trying to isolate Faile, if that's what she wants to do, she fails miserably at that. And I don't think she's trying to, because I think she... probably ends up bringing more people in because it ends up tying Faile down longer and like making it harder for her to escape, if anything. But I don't know. I'm really not sure what Aravine is driving at this point, if she's just in it for the escape or if she knows what she's doing in a dark friendly sense.
Right. Next thing I have is them arriving at Sivana's tent, or Faile arriving at Sivana's tent.
Yeah, they have their conversation with Arla at Arla and Lucille's wagon, and then they actually do go to Sivana's tent, where Sivana and Tharava are arguing about the implications of the cleansing.
Mm-hmm. And you've got Sivana being almost a wetlander, except for her eyes and her face. And then you've got Tharava, who's just like pure Aiel. And Algod, and, you know, just a very traditional dress.
Her choices of jewelry, the way she stands, everything about her. Sivana is, she's dropped being Aiel culturally. She has very much cherry-picked and remade Aiel cultural identity in her own image, whereas Tharava is very much a traditional Aiel that we would recognize in any clan. Finger rings and necklaces and silk, and she's going to be on a chair. The next thing you know, the tent is really tall. Like, it's ridiculous.
And I gotta say, in this argument between them, I'm on Sivana's side, right? Tharava's like, we better run. And Sivana's like, running, it's already so far away. It would take us weeks to get anywhere, to make any significant dent in the distance away that it is and get on the other side of these mountains. It's, you know, and it does. It ends after a day. So what would they? They'd pack up and start moving the next day. They'd be like, okay, well, let's go back to Malden because it's over.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think this is one of the few times we get to see what the major flaw with Tharava is, aside from the part where she's a sadist, because that's obviously a flaw in this regard. But the real flaw with her is that she has a very narrow and brittle and thus fearful approach to what they're doing. She rules from fear, and she also operates from fear. This dangerous thing is happening. We need to either fight or run. We can't wait it out. We can't think it out. We just got to run.
Tharava represents the sort of fear version of conservatism, of like,
yeah.
Just get me back to where we used to be, because all change is bad. Nothing can change. Change should be snuffed out for the sake of tradition and keeping things the same. That's who Tharava is to me. Is just this like completely conservative in the most pure sense of the word person.
Yeah, and I wish we got to know her before the series starts, because I'd love to know if that's how she was before her tribe was completely fucked by Sivana, because it might just be a response to Sivana, right? Right. But I also could see this being who she was for the last 70 years. You know, like either way.
But I can see her cruelty sort of growing as the restraints on her behavior become less tight. right? She becomes more like, I would like to see her be a little cruel in the beginning, just be like, ooh, that was kind of borderline mean, to then just like total torture and punishment levels that she does with Galena in these chapters. I would like to see that like character progression. I think would have been really interesting.
Yeah, because I feel like, you know, like you said, like you can kind of recognize a certain like element of like our political body in her. Like it would be nice if she had a character arc so we could see that development rather than just, oh, here's a fully developed caricature of scariness that has no development. There's nothing to seek into, that she's just scary. Like, but there could be some really interesting cultural conversations about the role of conservatism and how it reacts to stress through Tharava's character.
But she really is kind of a background character for Galena and Savannah, right? She sort of works mostly as a foil for those two characters rather than as her own independent character.
And neither of those characters have an interesting arc or development, so we really are getting shafted, like, all around. Missed opportunity. But you're right. Tharava is entirely there to make Savannah and Galena make sense. So
they find the knife that Faile had been hiding and punish her for it, which is the hog tying. Yeah,
Galena betrays Faile's escape plans because she very much doesn't want Faile to escape anyway, other than by Galena's graces. So, yeah, we get the whole like, oh, are we going to kill Faile? No, we're going to torture and dominate her because we need just a little bit of threat to our main character before we go back to clearly they're not going to get hurt. It's fine.
Yeah, and one thing I don't like necessarily about Sanderson's books is how little I feel like he deals with just the trauma of Faile suffering and everybody else suffering through Malden. Like, I feel like Jordan does a better job of that with Egwene and Rand and some of the other characters. Faile and these other characters, like, well, it's the last battle, moving on.
I loved the anniversary picnic scene with Faile and Perrin, except for the part where she says, Malden was good for me. It was good for us. Our relationship and our individual personalities were improved by that situation. That ruins the whole scene for me. It's worse than Rand's "we get to live again, therefore I'm not chronically depressed and traumatized" moment. Like, it's just, what? What? No! Like, you are being hogtied for trying to escape and then, borderline sexually assaulted into muscle compliance by the man who put you in the situation in the first place after he saved you from being actually sexually assaulted earlier in the day. But yeah, this is good for you. This is good for helping you mature and not be such a selfish brat. This is the only way.
And the way I'd say Jordan and Sanderson are different is Jordan would have shown you that she was more mature after experiencing this. Sanderson has her say it out loud.
Yeah.
Jordan would never have her say the line, "that was good for us because blah, 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 blah." That's what Sanderson was trying to show, in that they both became more independent. They both found, sources of leadership and strength while they were separated, right? Like, you can show that on screen, but to have the characters be that self-aware and explain it to the audience is always poor writing. And I think that's where Sanderson fails most often, is instead he does a lot of telling and not enough showing. And so it's very hard to come to your own conclusions when reading Brandon Sanderson's writing, because he tells you what those conclusions are supposed to be from the characters' own mouths. And Jordan never does that. Almost never.
Yeah. Actually, in this chapter, he does have one really good line to that effect where he says that, no, crying is good for you to manage your emotions, actually. One of the most straightforward things he ever says, where a character tells you, no, I cry because that helps me get through the day. And also men should cry more. But that's a very rare thing that just happens to be in this chapter as a counterexample.
Right.
But yeah, so they hogtie her and it's very uncomfortable. And then Roland shows up and somehow makes it more uncomfortable while also attempting to make it more comfortable.
Well, he saves her, I think, long-term damage is what she's saying, right? he puts the fire underneath her, and you know that feeling you get when you're so numb from cold you can't feel anything, and then you start to heat back up again, and it's painful. Ugh. You get like pins and needles.
So
I think that's what's happening. Is like it's painful, yes, but it's good that she's not literally having her skin freeze off, right? Like,
I mean, I don't think she was being left in a position to get permanently damaged, because the Aiel apparently never permanently damage their prisoners when they do this to them over the fucking months that this goddamn plot lasts. Like, I feel like he's just saving her from discomfort.
Extreme discomfort.
Extreme hours-long discomfort. I mean, she has the same line as Rand here of the broken up, she will not scream. Like, literally like Rand getting beaten in between his box sessions. It's absolutely awful and horrific, but like, I think he's just saving her discomfort. I don't think he's saving her permanent damage. At least that she doesn't think about that.
I think it's a risk of permanent damage if you put somebody in that position. A stress position can hurt you. Like,
not in this
stress
world.
Positions are not. What?
Not in this world, apparently, because he has so many people come out of this with no mention of joint pain. I just assumed that wasn't a thing. But you're right. In the real world, a stress position for hours in the freezing cold should give you permanent damage. Yeah, and Roland like does this weird thing where he like squeezes her so that way her joints get relieved, and then also starts massaging like the knotted up muscles. Like, he clearly knows how to fix this at a level which suggests that he's hogtied more than one person. It's like, how did you learn about this, sir?
If you're hogtied, you either have to relax your muscles, and then all the pressure is going to be on your wrists and ankles, right? And that's going to be extremely painful. Or you're going to have to try and hold yourself up, which is extremely tiring, right? And so what he's doing is actually squeezing her feet and hands together so that she doesn't have to maintain that position backwards.
He puts one arm across her chest and one around her knees. It's like he just puts a band around the widest part of her arc and like compresses in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That way she doesn't have to hold it herself.
Right. And it's extremely non-sexual, which I do appreciate. Which is nice, but also like, why you gotta hogtie people naked, Aiel? Why? Oh, for shame. But only wetlanders feel shame, and But yeah, he says that he brought the fire just because he's cold. He does the whole like, oh, I'm old and it's not for you, definitely not for you. It just happens to benefit you.
He's pushing the edges of what his honor allows him to do, right? Because he knows the right thing to do would be to free her, but he can't bring himself to do that because that would he'd probably get hunted down and killed. So what he has to do is basically, oh, I'm not warming you, I'm warming myself. Oh, I'm just occupying myself while I'm thinking of ways to make you laugh. I'm not trying to help you. You just happen to be helped by my presence. And that's not violating honor because I didn't intend to do it. You know, it's this very convoluted Jito way of offering help while it reminds me of the whole, we use spears because they're not weapons. You can also hunt with them.
Right.
Right? Like,
it's a foot-long piece of steel, but it's not a sword.
Yeah, right. It's just a knife. Right. Yeah. Yeah, our long-bladed hunting knives are 3 inches shorter than swords and therefore completely different. Totally different.
Yeah.
Even though we fight with them like swords.
Yeah. And like...
in our offhand. Yeah.
And Fail's thinking like, twice you've saved me from freezing. Twice it was your fault that I was in this position. How do I feel about that? And us as the audience are like similar discomfort. We're all there with you, Faile.
Mm-hmm. So it's a matter of time until he gets his head smashed in. But
yeah, he gets a good Mjolnir right to the temple.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, and then it flies back to Perrin's hand, and it's super epic. Oh wait, sorry, wrong franchise.
I think that's the first hammer, actually, not Mjolnir.
Oh, you're right. It is before the proper forging. Mm-hmm. And yes, we know it's Ma'alanir, but it's Mjolnir. Just be real.
It's the hammer that he got from the blacksmith back when he was forging. What was that, in Tyr or something like that? When Faile was still first watching him?
Yeah, that's his masterwork seal of approval hammer. Yeah, that he gets from that random guy who he just sort of accepts mastery from. It's like, yes, I am now beyond a journeyman. I am a master now. Right. Ta-da. Suddenly she realized that she was laughing, and not hysterically. Well, it was only partly hysteria. She was trussed like a goose for the oven and being saved from the cold for the second time by a man she thought maybe she would not stab after all. Savannah would be watching her like a hawk from now on, and Tharava might be trying to kill her as an example. But she knew she was going to escape. One door never closed, but another opened. She was going to escape. She laughed until she cried. Okay, Faile. Weird reaction, but okay.
Final quote from Aravine. I thought I could hide or that I could be forgotten, that I could come back to the light, but the great Lord does not forget, and one cannot hide from him.
That's sad. So maybe she didn't attach herself to Faile as a dark friend thing. Maybe she attached herself to Faile as her attempt at a new life redemption arc. Maybe I'm like inverse to every single detail about my hypothesis about her.
Not a lot of details there. Just she seems to be a normal ally all the way to the end until she betrays them. And I don't see, unlike with some of the other, like, Shuriam, where you're like, why is she getting wounded? What's going on with her? Like, why is she showing up right after the Gray Man is killed, right? Like, there's a lot of good foreshadowing there. I don't really see a lot for Aravine. It's just like, that's one of those, whoop, did not see that coming. Wow.
Okay, so maybe the part where she gets reinvigorated is where she realizes that Faile is going to escape, and so she has a second chance at life. And the whole thing is actually a shining virtue experience, and I was just headcanoning her dirty this whole time. This podcast, making me sad and wrong forever.
It might as well be our tagline. Making us sad and wrong.
Winter's Heart with the Choedan Call, perspective from Cyndane. This is Cyndane 2 of 3. I counted them up. There are 3 Cyndane POVs, and this is the second.
And the first one's her coming through the gateway. This is the second one. What's the third?
The third one is when she confronts Olivia and is battling to get closer and confronts Olivia solo and is like, what? Why is she so strong?
And we learn she gets driven away, right? Like, she doesn't get close.
Yeah, but she tries very, very hard. And that's her third POV, is getting driven back by Olivia being an absolute one-woman badass army. But for now, skirts hiked to her knees, cursing, Cyndane ran from her third gateway as soon as she was through. She could hear the explosions marching toward the site, but this time she had realized why they came straight for her. Tripping on vines hidden in the snow, bumping into tree trunks, she ran. She hated forests. At least some of the others were here. She had seen those fountaining fires speed elsewhere than at her. She could feel Saidar being spun at more than one place, spun with fury. But she prayed to the great Lord that she would reach Lews Therin first. She wanted to see him die, she realized. And for that, she would have to get closer.
So yeah, Cyndane, obviously Lanfear. She's calling him Lews Therin. She wants to see him. She wants to kill him, which is where she was, when she was finally convinced that Lews Therin could never be hers. She changed from wanting him to be hers to wanting him dead.
Right. If you are not mine, then you are dead is in full effect at this point. And we are now at least an hour into the battle, I would think. Mm-hmm.
Pretty much everybody's arrived. All the contenders have fanned out. They've all seen the fire go flying at them. So now everybody's sneaking through the forest without using power as best as possible. Because if they use the one power, column of fire.
Right, exactly. There's sort of these phases to the battle. The battle gets initiated and everyone gets alerted to the fact. Everyone arrives and gets to have their surprise round. And now we're settling into like the combat that, in game only takes 3 minutes. But like in the game players where like the DM and everyone is managing the battle, it's like the entire 5-hour gaming session.
Right. Except this is actually like 5-6 hours long of people sneaking around, maybe even 12 hours long of people sneaking around in the forest trying to get closer, and either getting scared away or killed.
Yeah, I imagine it's closer to 6 hours. I feel like they get there in the early morning and take off before sunset, or in the late morning, early afternoon, and like leave before it gets dark. But I'm not positive about that. But yeah, everyone knows what their role in the battle is now. There's not a lot of real surprises left. Now it's the grinding trading of blows over hours while Rand and Nynaeve do their thing.
For some reason, I thought they started near dawn. He who comes with the dawn.
Oh, they did ride out of the city at dawn.
Yeah.
So I sort of assumed that like it took a few hours to go from riding out of the city to actually hitting go on the Choedan call, but I don't know. That's just me taking forever to transition between tasks and always assuming it's going to take like a few hours to get from one space to another. That might just be me.
I kind of imagine Rand just being like, all right, let's get started. And CoT being, okay, everybody, he's starting. Let's get together. Hold on. You circles quick before he really starts pulling in power.
Yeah. How long do these things take, right? It's like we don't get descriptions of the arm waving. We also don't get descriptions of like, and then they took 20 minutes to argue about who gets the north or whatever.
Right. But that was an incredibly short little bit with not a whole lot in it from Cyndane.
I think it's there mainly to remind us of the fact that she's Lanfear and what her motivations are, and also to let us know that, yes, many of the other Chosen are there, just in case we'd missed that at this point. But yeah, not a lot of plot development, just sort of a status report.
But I'm glad we managed to get through that episode, that chapter. That was more, actually, than I thought we were going to get out of it, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I didn't think there was going to be a lot in it, but I kept highlighting all these different character things, and yeah, I don't know.
We'll see what that edits down to. Because it's just under at 150 in the raw. I'm going to hit stop. We threw a party for Never's friend / coworker. That was fun. Oh, cool. It was board game themed, and a lot of people came dressed up as different like board game pieces, so chess pieces or Candyland characters, and then we had we moved all the furniture outside to the sides of the room and put down like squares of different paper. Like a path on the board game, and you wrote things down on it. And so if people at the party stepped on one of the paper that said something, they had to do the thing, which is like take a shot or draw a card. It was a stack of cards, and it was fun. It was a good time. It was sort of like I made a cheesecake. So, and this is what I want to talk about, because I made a really good cheesecake that I'm very proud of. And of course, you go to hand out cake and everyone's like, no, I don't want any cake. I don't want cake. And they go, wait, it's cheesecake? Yeah, I'll take one of those. And it was really funny to watch people, turn around. And anyway, it was delicious. So I wanted to brag about that because the cheesecake was amazing. Very nice. A good cheesecake is truly delightful. Okay, that's the excitement in my life. Such an adult. I know, right? It's this full-time job stuff, man. It really does make for routines. It's very easy to get into. I get up, I go to work, I do the work, I come home, I eat, I sleep, especially when I'm working 12-hour days, right? And then the weekends, I've got to rest, and because it takes a lot out of you to work 12-hour days, and then do all the things I didn't do during the week, laundry, cook all the meals, all that kind of stuff. And it is amazing how easy it is to get into this, and then record, right? Like, this is my weekend. So we are your third space. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And not that I don't love doing this, but man, it's really easy to look back at the last 6 months and go, oh, I've been doing sort of the same thing every week. I haven't done a lot of variation. It's a little easier when you have the free time with not being fun employed. Well, unless you're autistic and really, really like routine, in which case you'll be unemployed and do exactly the same thing every day, except for the basic necessity of living and doing different shit and being like, wow, I actually did some yard work today. Good job, me. I guess I won't for the next 2 weeks. I will admit I do kind of thrive under the routine.
I love routine.
Yeah.
I feel so guilty about how little I want to change up my routine and how little I get bored of having the same single person around and only talking to people online through text. Like, I feel guilty about how comfortable that is, which probably means that I'm doing some internalized ableism. But I don't know. Routine allows me to do things like know exactly where in the season I am and to know exactly how the various plants that I check on a daily basis are doing and to really get in tune with these super subtle natural rhythms that I feel way more grounded in than anything I ever got in a city where everything is artificial and planted and heat island affected anyway. I like being in the country.
I like being in the city. We're funny that way. I hate being in the country where you have to get in your car to drive anywhere. I love that you can meet new people all the time easily without having to put in a lot of effort. I love that there are bars I can walk to and drink at and then come back home. I love that I can try all sorts of different foods kind of on a whim.
I do miss that one. That one fucking blows. Yeah. There are trade-offs. It's not 100% happiness living in the country, but...
No, and I'll say the same thing, right? Sometimes I wish I could get some space. Sometimes I wish I could see some nature. Portland's always been a pretty good trade-off for me because we are so close to...
Yeah.
It's a 20-minute drive to really get outside of the city sphere and start seeing, some nature. And then maybe another 40 minutes and you're in total wilderness. Yeah,
Portland is a really good city for having both. Mm-hmm. Oregon in general, you can have all the climate conditions. And Portland... You can have most of the awesomeness of a city, but like just as much access to mountains and beach and plains and desert.
I can't ever imagine moving anywhere in the U.S. besides Portland right now.
Yeah, definitely. I have never wanted to leave the Pacific Northwest. Mm-mm. Like, I've been a few places briefly, and it is always run screaming back to my lumber guardians.
I've lived in a lot of different places and visited even more, and none of them appeal to me the way the Pacific Northwest has, despite all of its flaws, which are many.
Yeah, but none of them are really like climate or flora or geography based. Like, all the issues here have to do with, like, people stuff. Like, everywhere else in the country is like, ew, the sky wants to eat you. The air is a wet blanket. Like, The
long dark of the winter, I will admit, at this northern latitude is not, that is probably the one geographical thing that sucks. It's with the way the sun's coming out these days, it's like, oh, wow, yeah, this is nicer.
For sure. But like, I don't know. I really get into my Scandinavian genes and just hunker down and say, bring the darkness. I can grow moss with the best of them.
I think I got some Spanish Italian in me that just loves the sun.
Yeah, my brother got all of our Southern Express genes. He tans. He's tall. Mm-hmm. He likes the sun. I am just like small and blonde and want to hide in a cave and hiss if anything too bright gets near me.
So you're the Golem to his Aragorn, is what you're saying.
Basically. Like, we took away such different portions of our shared heritage from our parents. Like, we look so different. He tans. I walk across a parking lot and I've got a sunburn. And this child is over here turning like toasted marshmallow brown. Unfair.
I know I don't look like I tan, but if I actually did get exposure to the sun, I would. It's just that I generally don't.
Yeah, Brandon's the same. He looks completely like just whatever pasty white Englishness, and then somehow from somewhere he just browns up, and him and my brother are just waltzing around, tall and brown, and I'm hiding in the shade, and it's just, me and my mom, we're both hiding in the shade.
So, do you want to do Winter's Heart for dessert, or do you want to, get the sweet stuff started just to get you going? Because it's not much of a treat. It's a little morsel.
Yeah, let's just do Cyndane just to get something fun.
Get something fun. All right. Yeah. All right. Well, you have to read the whole section. The whole POV is on you on this one.
The entire thing.
The entire thing.
Can you do words of it?
Can you do it without taking a second breath?
Probably not. What are you eating? It looks delicious.
Never just brought me a chocolate croissant, and it is delicious. I'm sorry. She got home, and handed it to me, and I was like, I'll just take one bite and then talk. And I had to scarf the whole thing down because it was so good.
Yeah, like I saw your eyes looking like off screen. I saw the plate come in and then the bong go out. And then you were eating something that was clearly releasing a huge amount of dopamine. Mm-hmm. It's just like, I require a homeopathic dose of what's happening.
It was like warm, and the chocolate was creamy.
A chocolate stuffed into a croissant.
Yeah.
Nice.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or
support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?